what textbooks do is fail to take you anywhere. You don't go anywhere when you read a textbook. You're right there. It's very clinical. It's very mushy and dry content. That's why everybody hates reading them. That's why, shock professors, no one reads college textbooks because they suck. They're terrible. What people want to do is they want to read someone like Jung. They want to say, wow, I can, no joke, no, nothing. I'm going to read this and it's going to sound incredibly interesting because Jung is such a prolific writer. So I can just pick up a book and say, one of the profound failures that our society has been in education. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody, but it's been one of the biggest detriments to our society as a whole. And I think that it's never going to stop unless we start to come together as a group, as we start to come together as a society to realize that what we need to do is to educate people maximally if we're going to ever try to fix the problems of radicalization in the masses, if we're ever going to try to fix the mental health crisis, we're going to have to try and fix these things through education. And that's not any education. Education is not relative. We have to take a stand for proper education. We have to assert what is right in the world if we're going to make if we're ever going to make a right-ordered system that we can thrive in. Because that's the ultimate goal that you and I are after, right? It's to thrive, it's to flourish, it's to have happy, healthy, joyful lives with friends, with family, with coworkers. That's what we want. And if we want that, because it's not what we have now, if we want that, we have to be educated. And there's no other way forward than if we try to educate ourselves, take it into our own hands, educate ourselves to the best of our abilities. But before I get too far ahead of myself, make sure you like the video and subscribe to follow along for the journey. If you think the content's great, or follow along because you want to ridicule me. I don't care. That's cool too. And leave a comment down below if you do want to ridicule me. That'd be awesome. Criticize me. That'd be great because I need to have pushback. I need to have somebody saying something in some sort of direction. So leave a comment. Follow along for the journey, and I'm also going to link my newsletter that comes out every Thursday down below, so you can click that link, follow along with that as well. You'd also get access to my reading list, and so that is just the great books of the Western world, all kind of summed up in a nice little bow, and with some author bios, and I spent really a long time on that. So you get that, and then you also get the my recommendations as well, just a few favorites of mine that I've really enjoyed over the years and that I'd like to pass along to you. And so you get all that for free. Newsletter comes out every Thursday. Like, subscribe, all the beautiful stuff. Thanks. And when I think of my own education in terms of what I just mentioned, I had no push really to grow intellectually, to grow as someone who needed to learn for their life to be better. There was no drive for me to ever want to succeed past what was the minimal requirement. And I think that's true for a lot of people, because when I started my education journey, which was, I would say, my junior year of high school, through the beneficence of some people that were really out for my best interests, not that anybody before hadn't been, but who really pushed me to be who I could be, I found that I was capable of way more than I had ever imagined, and I didn't know what to do with it. And so I just made sure I turned stuff in, and my grade jumped from a 1.5 to a 2.4 by the time I graduated, and that was just in like a year and a half-ish. And then from there, when I got to university, which was another beneficent act in some ways, because I had no plan after high school. I had graduated, and I said, I might enroll in the community college, but I had no real plan. I was asked to join the track team at the university in my town, little private Catholic school, and it was the start, I didn't know it yet, but it was the start of the rest of my life, really, because I've grown now to love education. I've grown to love learning, and not just because it's something that statistically sets someone up for success. It's not because it's something that you need to know in order for you to get a job, and it's not something you need to know in order to have a good life, because sure, that is part of it, but the whole of it is that education is what makes us human. The fact that we can transcend our normal impulses of our body to go far beyond what's actually here, and to extend ourselves past that in just no time at all, is just an incredible feat of the human mind and creation. And so it's just a wonderful thing that we have, and I want to help people. That's kind of the goal here, is to help people understand that they are capable of learning difficult things too, because I had no clue that I was able to do the things that I have done if I hadn't started to, one, I think, read hard books. I think that was the first step in my journey, was reading difficult things. And that started, again, that junior year of high school. Not that any book we read was super profound, but it was the start of me reading actual literature beyond just a textbook, which I believe is the fundamental fault of all of education in the West, is the reliance of education on textbooks. Because when we think about a great book, when we think about a great read, I can think back to the first time that I read, Ralph Waldo Emerson, or Henry David Thoreau, those classic, transcendentalists that were really pushed, I think, on a lot of people. A lot of English teachers pushed it because of, whatever. We're not going to get into that. But reading them, it was a different experience than reading Sumerian poetry. It was different than reading, the history on the Civil War. It was much different because all of that was condensed down. It was selected out in little paragraphs. But we actually read this book, right? It was fantastic. And I can think of other books, right? To Kill a Mockingbird, and what else do we read? 1984, right? I can think of those books too, and those hold places in my heart that are near and dear. But until I read something that asked a question that was really trying to get somewhere beyond just an observation or a fantasy, that's when it started to kind of tick for me. And that's what reading great books does, because what textbooks do is fail to take you anywhere. You don't go anywhere when you read a textbook. You're right there. It's very clinical. It's very mushy and dry content. That's why everybody hates reading them. That's why, shock professors, no one reads college textbooks, because they suck. They're terrible. What people want to do is they want to read someone like Jung. They want to say, wow, I can, no joke, no, nothing. I'm going to read this, and it's going to sound incredibly interesting because Jung is such a prolific writer. So I can just pick up a book and say, the calf with two heads and the war are one and the same, and the calf was the only anticipation of the war. What does that even mean? Come on. Primitive man finds this connection so unquestionable and convincing because the caprice of chance seems to him a far more important factor in the happenings of the world than regularity and conformity to laws. And so, right there, Jung's talking about just the way that primitive man finds the symbolism of that aforementioned statement, right? Which I overemphasized that, what does that mean? But Jung is right there questioning. And in just 2 sentences, I've read something far more profound than anything that I could read in a textbook. Because reading it's a phenomena. And what we want to do is we want to engage in that, because it's a human phenomena. The bees can't do it. The birds can't do it. The wolves and the sheep, they can't do it. Only we can. And so we have to engage in that if we're willing to become fully human, right? Because otherwise, what we can do is we can just, and this is the sentiment of modern culture, is to get everything in a digest, to have everything fed to us, right? Very ironic that things are called a feed, right? that you're probably seeing this in something that is a feed because it's been procured for you. You didn't have necessarily a choice to look at this video. You just were fed it, and it looked sort of appetizing, and you clicked on it. Good job, right? You didn't procure this, but now that you're here, what you're doing is engaging. And that's why the videos are so popular. That's why everybody's doing video content, is because it engages the actual person. It puts it beyond just the mush of a textbook. It puts it beyond the mush of a digest of someone else reading something to you. And that's why traditional newspapers are failing too, because nobody cares to read the muddled garbage that someone else put together because they had a deadline. Nobody wants to read that. What people want to do is they want to engage with something that is genuine, that is going to maybe help them, right? But at best, they're engaging with someone else across the screen that they've never met before. That's what people are wanting. And that's what books do, because when I read Jung, when I read Freud, when I read anybody, right? Those are just two on my desk. But when I read any prolific writer, what I get is not a spout of facts in a well-ordered manner. What I get is the person writing in their own style, and I can hear them as I read along, right? I can feel what they're feeling, and they make you feel a certain way, even in psychological literature. One of the most incredible things that I've done for my own journey, continuing journey through, into psychology, as I've graduated now, I've got my master's degree, right? I'm not technically in school, but as I'm continuing to be a student, one of the best things that I've been doing is creating a habit of learning. And so I started reading William James's Principles of Psychology. And that is one of the most phenomenal pieces of psychological work that I've ever read, ever. And it's technically a textbook on psychology, right? It's something that when you hear it, you're like, oh, gosh, who wants to read that? But when I actually read it, I am getting philosophy. I'm getting profound psychological insights. I am getting meat, like sweet meat. And that's what you get when you read books. And I want to draw a distinction, too, between the books of today and like very contemporary texts and great books, right? Hard works. Now, sometimes hard books are contemporary books, but unfortunately, that's just because some people can't write very well. Me being one of them. If you follow me on Substack, if you read my articles, you're going to know that. Right? You're going to know that I'm not a great writer, and I'm continuing to evolve my craft, right? I'm very open about that. But one of the things that I'm trying to do that is counter to the culture is to read the hard books, because what we want to do is we want to just read books on happiness. We want to read these nice, soft self-help books. We want to feel good about ourselves. We want to kick happiness's ass or kick depression's ass, right? Maybe happiness too. I think happiness causes lots of problems. But what we want to do when we're reading great books is to engage in the phenomena of reading. That's the most important thing that we can do, because our culture is counter to that. It wants to feed you rather than nurture you, right? It wants to just coddle you instead of strain you and make you grow into something. And what that really runs central to is Nietzsche's idea of the last man, right? When we think of why Gen Z is so radical and why Gen Z is so secularly religious, it's because Gen Z has been fed all of these things without ever doing the work for themselves, right? They've never done the actual work. They just are fed this. And to no fault of their own to a certain extent, right? Because that's the education system that they've grown up in. And that's the duty that we have today, is to educate, right? And so when we take a look at the state of education and we think of why everybody's struggling so much, why everybody's struggling in politics, why it's in shambles, why everybody's struggling mentally, why there's so much mental illness running around, and suicide rates are skyrocketing, and everybody and their grandma are on antidepressants, right? When we think about why everybody's failing at school, when we think about those things in the context of the lack of education and fostering of true good reading, that's no longer the baseline. What we run into is nihilism. We run into the belief that the universe, that everything is nothingness, that the existence of the person is meaningless, that there's nothing there for that person. And because there's nothing there, it's all slop. It's all disgusting vomit that somebody else has given you and packaged really nicely in a flashy little YouTube thumbnail, right? That's not the point. That's not the point of why we're here. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. And I'll cover it next time. But I'm just going to say this, that what we need to do is not fall into things like AI. What we need to do is we need to try to make ourselves independent and try to grow ourselves as much as we can in this mindset that I can read hard books and that my love of learning trumps anything else, right? That in order for me to be properly human, I need to be properly educated. That's what we need to take forward. That's what we need to do. And that's what we need to focus on. So thank you for watching. I appreciate you joining me on this, and I will see you in the next episode.